Hello, everybody. Welcome to, I think, episode 5 or 6. I'm sorry, episode 5 or 6 of my podcast. I have Preston Stewart on, and we're just going to talk about the state of the U.S. military, where we are around the world, where we're standing, and that's pretty much it. Preston, you want to just give a little intro?
Yeah, appreciate the invitation here, man. Been looking forward to this. So I make videos and content about war and conflict primarily. It dabbles into a bit of foreign affairs, national security at times. Of course, right now, as I'm sure we're going to get into, there's a lot of war and conflict to discuss. Kind of seems to be the theme these last couple of years. So by background, I was in the military for a few years, active duty, then guard and reserve. And just over a year ago, I actually wrapped that up. So I'm a full-blown civilian at this point.
Wow.
But yeah, man, looking forward to it.
All right. So the biggest question, I guess, is are U.S. resources spread out too thin now around the world? There's Iran, there's still the Caribbean, and then, of course, we have to manage containing China. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think we are. This has been interesting though too, because I didn't think that this would be part of the focus during a Trump administration. We saw for the first few months a focus on the border. So we saw a lot of active duty troops sent down south. We even saw active duty troops pulled into the interior, into a number of cities that I think across the board those ended up getting shut down. But all of the military force was being used here in the US, and then we kind of rolled into the Caribbean. And I'm sure you saw the arguments of protect the homeland and Western Hemisphere, we're going to be here. That was less than a year ago, man. So it's pretty
Yep.
wild that
Yeah.
that now the question is, are we spread too thin around the world? I think we are if we want to have the desired effect everywhere. We're seeing a pretty significant flow into the Middle East right now, and that's temporary. It just is. Like, whether it's the equipment that needs maintenance or the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, like, they're not going to be there forever. At the very least, we're going to rotate them out. And I think a great example is the carrier that is just now getting over there. Where did it come from? The Caribbean, where it was redeployed from the Middle East like 6 months ago. So, yes, we're spread too thin. Of course, the big question then is we're not on a wartime footing. So if we ended up in a war, what would that look like? And some of that we'd be able to overcome. We'd put more troops abroad. Probably have very limited troops overseas right now. But other things like the strategic airlift capability to move air defense assets and troops and resources to the Middle East, it's been like 4 weeks in the process, man. That's not good. Like, there's very few scenarios with China and Taiwan where 4 weeks later we're still moving resources into theater. So long way around to say, yeah, I think we're spread a little thin right now.
So it's taken 4 weeks. Do you think it's because we are doing this unilaterally or bilaterally? Because normally we're allowed to use other countries' airspace. There's a lot more cooperation going on. Like the UK isn't letting us use their air bases. I don't think other Middle Eastern countries are anywhere near as cooperative as they were even last year. Would you say that's the reason why it's taken so long? Because we are supposed to be like the logistic gods,
Yeah.
and 4 weeks is a pretty.
Well, but put this in perspective, right? Like, we're in less than a month, and we could have hit Iran at any point
Yes.
with at the very least Tomahawk missiles
Yes.
from ships in the region. So just to put in perspective, like, we are in a better position offensively and defensively today than we were yesterday and next week and
Yes.
last week based off this buildup, but we're still able to project force around the world very, very rapidly. I
Absolutely.
don't think a lot of this has to do with the ally question, because we are still landing aircraft in UK. They're just not allowing us to use those as jumping off points for the attack.
Ooh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for correcting that. All right.
Well, it's still really important, right? Like, and Diego Garcia is another one, that famous base in the
Yes.
Indian Ocean. We have aircraft there now. We have moved new aircraft
But
there
we
in the
can't
last.
Launch.
Correct.
But
Supposedly.
but
Supposedly.
even so, we're not, but even that is a logistical issue then. Even that causes significant delays because it's not like, oh, we just move our planes here and everything else stays in place. It's like, no, there's so much more that goes on. But like, what do we have? We have over 100 refueling aircraft there. We are concentrating so much in Iran. It is equivalent to what we put into Iraq during Desert Storm, right?
It's hard to make the comparisons, honestly, because those were such different fights. Like, Desert Storm and the invasion of Iraq we moved divisions across the border, manpower.
I meant to say, not Desert Storm, I meant to say Iraq. My mistake.
Yeah, but it's like, I think the best way to frame it is that this is the biggest buildup since then, but
Yes.
it is kind of apples to oranges just because the focus right now is a lot more air power in the
Yes.
region, and there's
No
not
boots on
like,
the
it's not
ground.
boots on the
You're
ground. Yeah.
right. Okay. Thanks for putting that into perspective.
I mean, it's still a big buildup. That's this weird thing, like, it is still a big buildup, but we can't, whatever the 100 plus thousand we had in Kuwait ready to go in
Yeah.
'03, it's not that. So if
Yeah.
somebody's looking at it in terms of number of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, it's significantly lower, but that's
Yeah.
why.
Okay. All right, good. Yeah, that's a very good point because our president has made it clear he doesn't really want to commit land forces. He wants quick precision strikes and then he wants it to be done. And it's possible to do that with Venezuela, but I think it's going to be harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder to do that with Iran just because they have so much more infrastructure set up than Venezuela did. Iran is a weapons producer, Venezuela is not. I mean, they have much more they I believe have a much more devoted military towards fighting Western interests. I don't think that Maduro had anywhere near the loyalty that that the Iranian military enjoys. Not of its people, but I mean of its military to the leader.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the comparisons there are valid comparisons between
Yes,
Venezuela and Iran.
for sure.
Personally, I have a concern that the biggest comparison being drawn is success, and that the administration is saying, "Look what we just did. We can
Yes,
do anything," kind of thing. And I think that might be why all of a sudden we're so focused on Iran. In terms of the capabilities, it's apples to oranges. It's not the same. The Iranian capability is significantly more robust,
yes,
far less likelihood that they just stop fighting, and it's
yeah.
very hard to get there compared to Venezuela.
It's
I mean,
mountainous.
we had troops, launching from the Caribbean, but realistically, we have a lot of aircraft that could reach that from the continental United States. It's just a very different setup, but and I'm nervous, we might get into this. I'm nervous that we don't actually have a strategy here, is, like, my predominant feeling, but to play the other side of this, Trump surprised us with Venezuela.
Yes, he
I
did.
don't think anybody really expected, I certainly didn't, that we were gonna wake up one morning and find out that US troops went into Caracas, took Maduro, and we didn't lose a single soldier, didn't lose a service member or any equipment.
His
I didn't think
most
that was in the cards.
his most secure facility, and within 3 hours, he was on a plane as a prisoner.
It was crazy.
The thing is, I'm sure you know this. I have no doubt that the United States could pummel the Iranian military and overcome them, and maybe even let's say take down the regime. But then it's not like the regime goes away. They just become one of the warring, powerful tribes that will just try to vie for power. That's what I think. May not be a tribe, but an establishment, whatever you want to call it, and they still have a lot of power and influence to sow a lot of dissent, a lot of chaos. So it could be a victory on paper, but it's only going to that destabilize the Middle East. Would
I
you
don't know what
agree?
our pla I 100% agree. I have no idea what our plans are here because most of the things that we're talking about, you're right, we can do a lot of damage to the Iranian regime and their military from the air. I don't know that any of the things we're asking for in these negotiations, assuming that they're being done in good faith and, like, those are things we actually want, I don't think you can get any of them through a bombing campaign. I would like all of them to happen, to be clear, but I don't know that it's a question of how many bombs do we drop before we get there.
Yeah. Well, but I think another question is, you brought up a very good point that nobody really expected Venezuela to happen. I don't think anyone expected the 12-day war to happen or for Israel to be as successful against Iran. I saw Iran as like the major contestant of power in the Middle East. I did not think it would not think that Israel would be able to pull off such devastating strikes against Iran. Just like, wow, okay. And then if Iran was powerful, they're not anymore. And so I think my problem was I was just thinking of equipment, numbers, and everything, but we need to think about intel. And Israel had significantly better intel. They were able to infiltrate to the degree of since 2007, they set up a factory in Iran where they were building drones, getting Iranian engineers to build drones that were going to be used against Iran. I mean, that's holy cow.
Devious. Yeah.
So we also have to think, like, and I said this during the 12-day war, like right when it ended, I said, Israel isn't done. This is just a regrouping. They took down the vast bulk of like mass damage capability from Iran. And now Israel's catching its breath. Iran is trying to build whatever it can, rebuild whatever it can from the ruins. But I think Israel then just started working on a softening up campaign to take down the regime. Because there's no way Israel just does the 12-day war and they're like, that's it, we're done. Why? Why would you leave an opening for actual regime change and then
It
just
reminds me of I know we're gonna run the risk of comparing everything to other events in the Middle East, but it
please?
reminds me of the Gulf War to the invasion in '03, right? We've got
Yeah.
Saddam on the run. His
Yes.
military is faltering. They're retreating. We've got the resources in the region, and we say, "Don't do it again," and we leave. And
Yeah. Uh-oh.
we're back there 12 years later, 12 years later. A lot of differences, I know, but you have to imagine that Israel has that thought of they've got the Iranian regime on the ropes.
Yes.
You know, if
Yes.
they could push that button, they would all day.
And that's another thing. So I hear so many people, including that guy Mahfouz Talukder, who I like. We've actually had some long discussions. Do you know Mahfouz?
I don't think so, no.
I think he means well, but he spreads a lot of disinformation that's very anti-American and pro-Middle Eastern. And he's like, well, no, Israel suffered a lot. Israel suffered so many catastrophic losses. And that I don't really argue. I just say, well, how come Iran had like funeral after funeral after funeral for so many lost leaders while Israel had maybe one? But the other thing is Israel created so much havoc and so much damage in Iran, and Iran's retaliation against Israel was limited at best. Yet Iran killed 20 to 50,000 of its own people for protesting and riots. So we understand the Iranian regime, their retaliation is tenfold. It's very disproportionate. And they were willing to do this to their own people. To me, that shows they are willing to do much worse towards any outside influence, but they couldn't do that to Israel. They literally did not have the capability. That just emphasizes to me Iran's strategic weakness. Because they could retaliate against the Iranian people, they did, but they couldn't retaliate against Israel. They didn't have the power to.
I'd push back on that a little bit because, I mean, what they did internally, domestically is awful, like just
Yes.
full on brutality. And
Yeah.
that's the crackdown of an authoritarian regime. But when it comes to their attacks on Israel, I think you and I are in the same camp where we're looking at it and saying, look what Israel did and look what Iran did. And it's not
Yes.
the same and it's not close.
Yes.
And by that metric, we're correct. That's not one to easily argue,
Yeah.
whether it's casualties or damage or whatever. But the Iranian leadership largely looked at the 12-day war not as a defeat, but as a form of deterrence. They view that the United States said, we want this has got to end, which we were pushing for it to be over, right? This has to be, and I think in retrospect, Israel was not ready to end. They were ready to keep going.
Yes. But I agree with you. Yeah. Israel was like, no, let's keep going. No, 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 no. We're not done. We're not done. On the day of the ceasefire, Israel just like opened the floodgates to get as much done as they could. But that's what I mean. I don't think Iran had the capacity to properly retaliate the way they desired.
So the way I would look at that right now, what has me nervous right now is I think that what we saw from Iran was they're trying to reestablish deterrence. This is what it's
Even
going to
even
cost
the
to
first few days, even the first 5 days when Israel had air supremacy.
as a blanket the entire war.
Okay.
And to be clear, Israel wiped the floor with Iran, and it
Yes.
wasn't close. But from the perspective of some leadership in Iran, they view it that was not an existential threat to the regime. That was a matter of reestablishing deterrence.
Okay.
So they think in a way that they got that because the United States and Israel stopped.
Mm,
The
okay.
next time around, now they're weaker. They just had this brutal crackdown on 30 plus thousand people. We know their air defenses are limited. We know their offensive capability is limited. This next time around, I don't think they're going to be trying to tit for tat and do a little symbolic blow in Qatar after giving the US 12 hours warning. We might see a different style of attack.
Well, that's probably why the US is concentrating so many forces. That's why there are 2 aircraft carrier strike groups. That's why the Al Ayudi base is loaded to the gills, and I think they've set up a whole bunch of air defense systems. I think that's now an air defense hub. they've devoted a lot of resources there. And what's interesting, even though the EU isn't as cooperative, they've finally passed a measure stating that the IRGC is in fact a terrorist group, which to me is a very subtle or not so subtle nod. Like, okay, fine.
Yeah. They're not they're not friendly with Iran, right? I mean, we tend to draw these hard lines where if you're not 100% on board with everything, well, you've seen it with the UK recently, right? Where the UK says you can't launch bombers off our
Yes,
airfield to hit Iran, and people said, "Oh, so now the Brits love Iran?" Like, no, hold
it's
on.
not. Yeah,
There's a middle ground there. But yeah, that was a big move, but it feels like the EU's been pretty quiet the last few weeks. I don't think I've heard much on
yeah,
this issue.
yeah. They have been quiet because I think they're trying to distance themselves from any actual damage to Iran, but they're trying not to alienate the United States any further, or they're trying not to make America alienate them any further. Because I think Trump has really done a very good job of spooking our crucial allies.
Do you think the Iraq war hangover has any effect there? Like, our European allies are like, "We're not doing that again." It didn't
Yes.
go over well okay, yeah.
I think so because we failed. Like we failed in Iraq. I mean, fine, we took out Saddam Hussein and everything, but again, we find out that the report was no, there were no weapons of mass destruction. And then maybe the first 2 years were seen as okay, but then it completely disintegrated, and now the Middle East is just even more of a hotbed for terrorism and instability than it was. And Iraq has become so much more influenced by Iran. At least when Saddam Hussein was there, and I didn't like the guy at all. He was a counter to Iran. Like Iran, I mean, he invaded the country. They fought a whole war, for 8 years. Iran has no such limitation. I mean, there's Israel, absolutely, but even though Israel and Iraq hated each other, both Israel and Iraq were not friendly with Iran. So there was a lot of potential curbing of Iranian influence. And now, what is Iraq? Iraq has a lot of American influence, but I would say that Iran has even more influence in Iraq.
Hijack this, but on that subject, I'm very interested in your thoughts on something that's happened in the last couple days.
Okay.
Just big picture, have you seen kind of the arguments being made for war? With Rubio last night talking about Iran is developing weapons to hit the United
Oh,
States.
how just it's like that's the Gulf War. That's the goal. I heard the same thing. Do you remember I was 10, maybe you're younger, but I was 10 and they were talking about Iraq had missiles that could reach us. And I mean, I was like, "Oh my gosh, are we going to beat Iraq?" The media really made it look like they had a chance against us. And they were the fifth largest army in the world and they were one of our largest customers for weapons, so they had a lot of our own tech. That was pretty scary. And now it's like I feel like they're drumming up the same nonsense again. I believed the Pentagon when they said that they wiped out the vast bulk of Iran's nuclear program. And now the Pentagon is saying, nope, they're a week away. They're a week away from being able to properly enrich uranium, and they're able to do all
Wait
these
a minute.
things. So
Yeah.
I don't trust anything coming out of the White House at this point.
Very nervous. And maybe I'm too optimistic or too
Mhm.
whatever, naive here. I'm on board with having the conversation of, is this in the strategic interest of the United States? Yes or no? But I feel like we need to be on a level field here. And when I hear Rubio talking about, like, hearing that Iran has missiles that can hit the United States, like, wait a second, like, where did this come from? And people are kind of sifting through well, maybe he means that their proxies could have moved one. Like, it feels too much like manufacture. It
Yes.
was in the same week we had an Israeli official, so not an American, but an Israeli official talking about Iran having chemical and biological weapons ready to go on warheads. We've got the talk about their nuclear program nearing completion. Like, I don't know, man. I just feel like I blinked and all of these things that were not discussed a week ago happen
Yes.
in a few days. It just feels like
It's completely manufactured. I do not believe the narrative at all. I think Israel is just trying to scare people more, scare the stupid people, maybe and quietly sweeten the pot. Well, if you do this, we'll give you this. They might be doing something like that. And again, if the 12-day war never happened, I'd be like, okay, maybe they probably do. But we just saw what happened. We saw how ill prepared they were. We saw how easily they were so infiltrated by Israel. Israel would have known this months ago if that was true. And if it really was a threat, they would have been saying it.
it feels I feel like I'm being
They're trying to usher us in, and they're trying to psychologically prepare the American people for the notion that we may have a sustained conflict with Iran, and that this is more important than even Venezuela, where we were okay with it because it didn't cost any troops. I think that's what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to open the window in our mind to be like, well, we might need to have to just station some troops here and do this, which is which is absolute BS. Usher regime change in Iran through a bombing campaign with Israeli help, fine. It should be much more in Israel's interest to really commit their forces to this. It should not be up to American soldiers, the fate of Iran. All right. There were so many protests that I'm sure if Iran didn't kill those 30,000 protesters, if they were still alive, they sure could have helped the American campaign. In my opinion, we should just be devoting our resources to making it easier for the Iranian people to bring about their own regime change. That's it.
Yeah, I think where I get frustrated with this new stuff popping up is that, when you go down the list of why Iran is a threat to the United States, I'm with you, and I want a new regime there, right? I want
Yeah.
freedom for the Iranian people. There's just full of awesome
Yeah.
people in Iran. I
Yes.
feel like we don't understand that enough. This is
They're
not North
amazing.
Korea. It's not even Russia. Like, the people in Iran do not like their government,
Yeah.
and they want to be closer with Israel and the United States. So I think I get frustrated because it's like, if we talk about their nuclear program and their ballistic missile program and their support for proxies and their crackdown on protesters, I'm with you every step of the way. But then we veer off into biological weapons on the tips of missiles that could reach the United States. And it's like,
No,
now I feel like now you're treating me like I'm stupid or something.
they absolutely are. They are treating you like you're stupid, and that's one of the shames. When we were at the NATO summit in 2024, uh, I think it was the deputy speaker. He was like one of the higher ups in NATO, and he gave this whole speech on how Russia is a threat, and if they take Ukraine, then they may take Poland, and that leads to World War III. And I just didn't believe it. I was very polite in my questioning, but I was like, NATO has a budget of over $2 trillion, while Russia's is maybe 100 billion. I mean, come on. And his thing was, well, Russia could make the weapons cheaper, and I'm like, I was quiet, but come on, that's nonsense. So they put out these manufactured arguments that are very easy to take apart if you know anything. If you know the numbers, it's just no, that's BS. And I'm not saying Russia's pathetic or weak. I mean, Russia could do some damage, but they can't win. The only thing Russia could do is maybe do a really nasty first strike before a coordinated effort would flatten anything Russia threw at us. And it's the same. This is in the same family of Iran being able to put chemical weapons or biological weapons on the tips of missiles that could reach the United States. And don't you agree? Yes, Iran is a threat to American troops stationed in the Middle East. Those missiles can definitely reach our troops. They can disrupt world trade, 100%. They fund proxies, 100%. So that's a threat. Those are threats. And I think these aren't enough to sell the American people on an actual war with Iran.
I guess that must be it, right? We're not there.
Unless you have an idea.
No, it feels lazy in a way. Like,
Hmm.
are we really going back to the WMD scare? Like,
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
tried and failed that one, or maybe didn't actually. I guess that did work.
You
Maybe
know,
they
one
just
of
forgot.
One of your biggest fans, Intel guy, even said that, Intel guy, right? That Intel
Yeah,
guy. He's actually a beautiful person. So is Rebel Intel. They're great people. I think maybe because they were in Intel for so long, they just became very jaded towards anyone who gives some support to the institutions. I don't know. But I love those guys. And I think if I ever got in some trouble, I think they'd have my back. Anyway, Intel guy said that there were some holes that the initial bombs that America dropped in the Iranian centers. There were some holes that the American pilots actually dropped another bomb in. So they were showing off. Hey, we just dropped a bunker buster. Watch, I'm going to drop it right in that same hole. And they did it. We have so much capability to obliterate what Iran had. And I think we did it. And I think we're just like with Russia, we're trying to prop up this like aging, dying boogeyman, like, oh, look scary. Ooh.
Khamenei's gonna
Uh,
go one way or the other. He's like 86 years old.
who Khamenei?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
but
like
I mean
86 years
there's a
old. So
successor.
at some point, there's not a clear one right now. Now, I'm not suggesting wait him out and see what happens. In fact,
Yeah.
one of the arguments for initiating some sort of military action is he's on his way out at some point in the next decade. We have to assume the guy's not going to be here any longer. Wouldn't it be nice to play a role in what the future of Iran looks like? Uh,
Yeah.
I get the arguments. I get the arguments for and against that, but yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to be a real thing for a while. It's not. Yeah, we don't know who the next guy up is.
So we've talked a lot about Iran, but I want to jump into another subject. If we do, let's say if all the resources that are currently around Iran, if they all of a sudden start attacking, right? And they launch a strike, what would happen if right when the US starts committing its sources against Iran, that's when, let's say, Russia tries to invade not a NATO country, but another non-NATO country. Actually, no, I can't say that because I think Russia's already depleted so much of its forces. But if China does try to like take Taiwan, do you think the United States would be able to repel a Chinese blockade and then an eventual invasion? Would America be able to deter China from it while attacking Iran?
Not while. If China was able to, now that'd be a miss on our part if we missed all of the, again, think of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how much there was like, wait a minute, something's different, something's going to happen. And we clearly knew. The American intelligence knew. And we took the crazy step of going to NATO, if you remember, and sharing that intelligence publicly and saying, "Look at this! They
Yeah,
are going to invade to try
200,000
to."
troops on the border.
Yeah. So if first off, I think it would be a huge miss. Like if we started striking and China was like, now we go, then we've screwed up somewhere royally because we didn't see those preparations being made. And there would need to be significant preparations to do that. But even if we weren't, I think that's a real question, even if we aren't in the middle of attacking Iran, honestly. We have limited resources in the Pacific. Here we are talking about 4 weeks to build up in the Middle East. That's an uncontested environment, man. They're flying across the Atlantic, flying across Europe,
Yeah.
flying through Israeli airspace,
Yep.
and it's taken us that long. So I don't think so. I think the opening phases of an issue with China would be a real challenge unless we were ready to receive it and had to kind of surge forces into the area.
All right. And
But then you know what? I mean, to be fair,
yeah.
it's not as though like if we blink for the wrong week, China takes Taiwan. Like them getting across the strait is a significant ordeal and
It's
then
a
holding
treacherous
it
strait.
and then
That's one of the
keeping it
most
supplied. Yeah. So there's a lot there.
yeah. Well, I want to bring this to your attention. So in 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, Middle East was still recovering from Israel attacking all the countries at once and winning. And then the Egyptian military at the time was pretty smart because after the conclusion of the 7-Day War or the 6-Day War, the Egyptians kept having these military exercises in Sinai, in the Sinai region, right on the border. But they just kept having these exercises day by day for 2, 3 years. So eventually the Israelis were like, yeah, okay, they're just doing another training exercise. And then they had another training exercise on that day of Yom Kippur in 1973. And then boom, they went in. They desensitized the Israelis into thinking that it was just another exercise, but no, it was a full-on invasion. And that's how they were able to do so much damage. So China is always surrounding Taiwan. Always, always with airplanes, with their ships, all these things. So that could be a strategy of China. They're getting everyone's desensitized. Ah, Taiwan's surrounded again. Okay. And that's something worth considering. But again, there is surrounding Taiwan and then there's entering Taiwan. And then there's the fact that Taiwan is the world's best semiconductor producer. It's not like the airplanes could just start bombing willy-nilly. It's not like they could just launch aimless missile strikes because then Taiwan is just a crater that produces nothing. So it's a seesaw.
And we're jumping very quickly to China using military force to take Taiwan. And I think again, if we want to use the Russia-Ukraine comparison, Russia had been kind of infiltrating Ukraine since the end of I mean, during the Cold War, right? Like for a
It was
long
there.
time, yeah, forever,
Yeah.
yeah. But then if we go back to 2014, they didn't invade, right? They found other ways to go about kind of putting their troops in there and getting their fingers in Ukraine. So I think it wasn't until 2022 where they finally said enough. We're going in with the military. So I think we should think about that with China as well. It doesn't make sense that China's first
Yeah.
move would be
Bold
troops
military
landing
action.
in Taiwan, right? It seems like they've got a lot of other options at their disposal.
So I want to jump in. All right, guys, this is the free part, and now we are gonna go to Patreon. So if you want to watch past this point, please go on to my Patreon, subscribe, and then you'll be able to watch the entirety of this interview.